Chapter 1. The text that changed everything. Jean Nelson was halfway through her second cup of coffee when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, expecting a grocery reminder or a meme from her best friend. Instead, it was a name she hadn't seen in 3 years. Mark. The message was short, predictable, and dripping with the same faux sincerity he'd perfected during their relationship. Hey stranger. Been thinking about you. Hope you're good. Jean stared at the words, waiting for the familiar rush. The sting of nostalgia, the ache of what if. Nothing came. No anger, no longing, not even the faint hum of curiosity. It was like reading a classified ad for a used car she didn't want. She set the phone down and took another sip of coffee. 3 years ago, that text would have detonated her day. Back then, Mark was her gravitational pull, even when she knew he was bad for her. He was a walking poster for everything wrong with men. Not all men, just the ones who somehow monopolized attention. The charming ones with hollow promises and a talent for making you doubt your own instincts. Jean had clung to him like a life raft, not because he was extraordinary, but because the alternative, being alone, felt like drowning. It took months of counseling to untangle that truth. She wasn't addicted to Mark. She was addicted to the illusion of safety he represented. Her therapist had called it out gently, like peeling tape from skin. You're not afraid of losing him, Jean. You're afraid of facing yourself. So she faced herself. She stayed off the dating market for 3 years, enduring jokes from friends who dubbed her Saint Jean and the Nun. She learned to love quiet mornings, solo movie nights, and the kind of peace that comes when you stop chasing chaos. And now, here she was, staring at a text that should have rattled her but didn't. Jean picked up her phone, blocked Mark's number, and exhaled. The sound surprised her. It was light, almost amused. She opened her calendar app and scheduled a therapy session. Not because she was spiraling, but because something had shifted. She was ready. Not in the manifest your soulmate way her friends swore by, but in the grounded, practical way that felt like truth. She wanted connection, not a savior, not a distraction. Just someone who could meet her where she was. Jean smiled into her coffee. For the first time in years, the idea of dating didn't feel like a battlefield. Felt like an adventure. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to begin. Chapter 2. The Nun joke and the Pact. Jean's favorite brunch spot was already buzzing when she walked in. The scent of cinnamon rolls and espresso curling through the air like a warm hug. She spotted her friends immediately. Maya, waving like a lighthouse beacon, and Claire, already halfway through a mimosa. Look who decided to grace us with her presence, Maya teased as Jean slid into the booth. Saint Jean, patron saint of celibacy. Jean rolled her eyes, reaching for the menu. You know, I could smite you for that. Claire grinned. You'd have to break your vow of silence first. Jean laughed because honestly, they weren't wrong. 3 years without dating had turned into a running joke among her friends. They'd started calling her the Nun after she skipped a Valentine's Day party, and the nickname stuck like glitter on carpet. I'm not a nun, Jean said, scanning the specials. I've just been recalibrating. Recalibrating? Maya arched a brow. What are you, a spaceship? Jean ignored her and flagged down the waiter. Avocado toast and a latte, please. When the waiter left, Claire leaned in, eyes sparkling with curiosity. So, what's this big news? Maya said you texted her something cryptic. Jean took a breath, savoring the moment. I'm ready to date again. 2 jaws dropped in unison. Maya actually clutched her pearls. Well, her necklace, but the drama was appreciated. Wait, wait, wait. Maya held up a hand. You, Jean Men are Trash Nelson? Ready to date. Jean smirked. Don't make me regret telling you. Claire squealed, loud enough to earn a glance from the next table. Finally. Oh my God. This is huge. What changed? Jean told them about the text from Mark, about how it landed like a pebble instead of a grenade. How she blocked his number without a second thought. How that silence inside her felt like freedom. Maya whistled. That's growth, babe. Proud of you. Claire raised her glass. To Jean, emerging from the convent. Jean clinked her water against Claire's mimosa. Don't make it weird. But Maya was already plotting. Okay, so what's the plan? Apps? Blind dates? Speed dating? Oh my God, we should do speed dating. Jean groaned. I said I'm ready to date, not ready to audition for a rom-com montage. Claire tapped her chin thoughtfully. You need structure. A goal. Otherwise you'll overthink and bail. Jean narrowed her eyes. What kind of goal? A pact, Maya declared, like she was announcing a royal decree. 3 dates in the next 2 months. No excuses. Jean blinked. 3. Claire echoed. 1 could be a disaster. 1 could be meh. And 1 could surprise you. Jean considered it. 3 dates didn't sound impossible. Terrifying, yes, but not impossible. And maybe that was the point. Lean into the discomfort, see what happens. Fine, she said, trying to sound casual. 3 dates. 2 months. Maya slapped the table. Yes, Operation Unknown is officially underway. Jean laughed, because what else could she do? Her friends were relentless, and maybe that was exactly what she needed. A push, a pact, and a little bit of chaos to shake up her carefully curated piece. As the waiter returned with her latte, Jean felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Not dread. Not desperation. Hope. And maybe, just maybe, excitement. Chapter 3. Swipe right. Panic left. Jean stared at her phone like it was a ticking bomb. The dating app icon glowed innocently on her screen. A cheerful little heart mocking her hesitation. She had downloaded it last night after 2 glasses of wine and a pep talk from Maya over FaceTime. Now, in the sober light of morning, it felt like opening Pandora's box. She tapped the icon. The app sprang to life with a chirpy welcome, Jean, and a confetti animation that made her cringe. Okay, she muttered. Let's do this. First came the profile setup. Photos. Jean scrolled through her camera roll, rejecting anything that screamed I'm trying too hard. She settled on a mix. One candid shot at a farmer's market, one hiking photo, proof she occasionally leaves the couch, and one where she looked effortlessly chic at Claire's birthday dinner. Bio section. Say something witty, the app prompted. Jean typed, deleted, typed again. Recovering from a 3-year sabbatical from dating. Fluent in sarcasm. Will trade book recommendations for good coffee. Not bad, not great, but honest. She hit save and braced herself for the onslaught of profiles. The first guy was shirtless, flexing in a gym mirror. His bio read, alpha male. Looking for my queen. Jean snorted. Hard pass. Swipe left. Next. A man posing with a fish. Why was it always a fish? Swipe left. Then came the parade of cliches. Guys who love adventure. Guys who don't take life too seriously. Guys who listed sapiosexual, like it was a personality trait. Jean swiped left so many times her thumb started to ache. And then Ethan. His profile photo was simple, him in a navy sweater, smiling like he actually meant it. No fish, no gym selfies. His bio read, writer, coffee enthusiast, believes pineapple belongs on pizza. Don't fight me. Jean grinned. Pineapple on pizza was a hill she was willing to die on. She hovered over the heart icon, pulse quickening. Swipe right. The app chimed. It's a match. Jean stared at the screen, half thrilled, half terrified. A match meant conversation. Conversation meant, what exactly? Before she could spiral, a message popped up. Ethan. So, what's your stance on pineapple pizza? Should I prepare for battle? Jean laughed out loud, startling her cat. She typed back, Jean, firmly pro-pineapple. I'll die on that hill. Ethan, excellent. We can share a pizza without bloodshed. The banter flowed easily, like slipping into a warm bath. They talked about books, coffee, and why people pose with fish. Neither had an answer. By the time Jean put her phone down, her cheeks hurt from smiling. She wasn't naive. One good conversation didn't guarantee anything. But it was a start. And for the first time in years, Jean felt the flutter of possibility. Chapter 4. The first date fiasco. Jean had promised herself she wouldn't overthink it. It's just dinner, she repeated like a mantra as she slipped into her favorite navy dress. The one that said I tried, but not too hard. Her hair behaved for once. Her lipstick was the perfect shade of confidence. And her nerves were, well, screaming but manageable. This wasn't Ethan. Not yet. Tonight's date was Brad. A match from the app who seemed harmless enough. His profile said he worked in finance, loved dogs, and enjoyed deep conversations. Jean figured that sounded safe. The restaurant was cozy, dimly lit, with soft jazz humming in the background. Jean arrived 5 minutes early, because punctuality was her love language. She scanned the room until she spotted him, tall, tan, and wearing a blazer that looked like it had been ironed by angels. Jean? He asked, flashing a smile that could blind satellites. That's me, she said, shaking his hand before sliding into the booth. The waiter appeared, took drink orders, and left. Jean tried to relax. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. So, Brad began, leaning forward like he was about to share state secrets. Do you invest? Jean blinked. In what sense? Crypto, he said, eyes gleaming. Bitcoin, Ethereum, NFTs. It's the future. Jean smiled politely. I dabble in mutual funds? Brad chuckled like she'd told a joke. Mutual funds are for people who don't understand wealth creation. You gotta think big. Alpha mindset, you know? Jean sipped her water, praying for strength. For the next 20 minutes, Brad launched into a TED talk about decentralized finance, blockchain, and something called staking. Jean nodded occasionally, her brain slowly melting into soup. When the waiter returned with their entrees, Jean thought salvation had arrived. But Brad barely paused to breathe. See, the thing about traditional banking is, Jean tuned out, focusing on her pasta like it was a lifeline. She texted Maya under the table. Jean, send help. He's explaining crypto like it's a religion. Maya replied instantly, Maya, fake emergency. Now, Jean considered it. Dramatic? Yes. Necessary? Absolutely. She waited for a lull. There wasn't one, but she seized a moment when Brad inhaled. Oh no, Jean said, clutching her phone. My friend just had a situation. I need to go. Brad frowned. Everything okay? Yeah. Just urgent. She stood, tossing cash on the table for her share. Great meeting you. She bolted before he could offer to walk her out. Outside, the cool night air hit her like freedom. Jean exhaled, laughing at the absurdity. Her first date in 3 years and she'd escaped like a fugitive. She texted Maya again. Jean. Operation Unknown is off to a rocky start. Maya. Better than marrying a crypto bro. Jean grinned, hailing a cab. Disaster or not, she felt oddly proud. She'd survived. She'd shown up. And tomorrow she'd try again. Because this was just the beginning. Chapter 5. Enter Ethan. Jean arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early, because punctuality was her coping mechanism. The place was charming, warm with tables, Edison bulbs dangling like fireflies, and the faint hum of indie music that made everything feel slightly cinematic. She chose a corner table, the kind that offered both privacy and a strategic view of the door. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Running 2 minutes late. Hope that's okay. Jean smiled. 2 minutes was practically early in dating terms. She typed back, no problem. I'm here, caffeinating. She ordered a latte and tried not to overanalyze every detail. Should she have worn the green sweater instead of the navy blouse? Was her hair too casual? Did her laugh sound like a hyena? Before she could spiral, the door opened and in walked Ethan. He was taller than she expected, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends and a smile that looked easy. Not forced, not performative, just warm. He spotted her immediately and waved, crossing the room with a confidence that didn't feel arrogant. Jean? He asked, voice smooth but friendly. That's me, she said, standing to shake his hand. His grip was firm, his palm warm. Sorry for the delay, he said, sliding into the chair across from her. Traffic was a nightmare. No worries, Jean replied, gesturing to the menu. Coffee's worth the wait. He grinned. Agreed. I'm a coffee snob, so this place is basically my church. Jean laughed, relaxing a little. Good to know. I wouldn't want to commit a caffeine sin on our first meeting. The waiter appeared, Ethan ordered a black coffee, and then it began, the dance of conversation. So, Ethan said, leaning in slightly, your profile said you're fluent in sarcasm. That's a bold claim. Jean smirked. It's not a claim. It's a lifestyle. Prove it, he challenged, eyes twinkling. Jean tilted her head. You're drinking black coffee. What are you, a tortured poet? Ethan laughed, a real laugh that made his eyes crinkle. Touché. Though I do write sometimes. Really? Jean perked up. What kind of writing? Essays, short stories. Occasionally something that pretends to be poetry. He shrugged. Mostly for myself. Jean felt a flicker of intrigue. That's actually cool. They talked about books. He loved Vonnegut. She confessed her obsession with Zadie Smith. They debated pineapple on pizza. Still a hill they'd both die on. Swapped travel stories, and laughed over the universal weirdness of dating apps. Jean found herself leaning in not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Ethan was funny without trying too hard, thoughtful without sounding rehearsed. And when he listened, he really listened. Eyes steady, expression open. For the first time in years, Jean wasn't counting the minutes until she could leave. She wasn't crafting escape plans or fake emergencies. She was enjoying herself. When the check came, Ethan reached for it. My treat, he said. Jean hesitated. You sure? Absolutely. You can get the pineapple pizza next time. Next time. The words landed like a spark. As they walked out into the crisp evening air, Ethan turned to her. This was fun. Can I text you? Jean smiled, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Anticipation without dread. I'd like that. They parted with a hug that lingered just long enough to feel promising. Jean walked to her car, heart light, steps quick. She didn't know where this would go, but for the first time in years, she wanted to find out. Chapter 6. The Therapist's Curveball. Jean sat in the familiar beige armchair, legs crossed, latte in hand like a shield. Dr. Patel's office smelled faintly of lavender and old books, a comforting mix that always made Jean feel like she was stepping into a sanctuary. So, Dr. Patel began, adjusting her glasses. You said in your message you're ready to date again. Jean nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. I've already been on 2 dates. One was catastrophic. The other was actually great. Dr. Patel's brows lifted. Great how? Jean hesitated, replaying the coffee shop scene in her mind. The easy laughter, the way Ethan listened like her words mattered. He's normal, funny, smart. It felt good. Dr. Patel leaned back, her expression thoughtful. That's promising. But let me ask you something. Why do you want to date now? Jean blinked. Because I'm ready? Ready for what? Dr. Patel's tone was gentle, but the question landed like a pebble in Jean's stomach. Jean fumbled for an answer. Connection, companionship, someone to share things with. Dr. Patel nodded slowly. Those are valid reasons, but I want you to consider this. Are you dating because you genuinely want to build a relationship, or because you want to prove something to yourself? Or to others? Jean stared at her latte, watching the foam swirl like a tiny storm. I don't think it's about proving anything. Not even to yourself? Jean opened her mouth, then closed it. The truth was uncomfortable. Part of her did want to prove something, that she wasn't broken, that she could do this without falling apart. Dr. Patel smiled softly, as if reading her silence. Jean, there's no shame in wanting reassurance. But if dating becomes a way to validate your worth, it can lead you back to old patterns. Jean exhaled, the weight of the words settling in. So what do I do? Stay curious, Dr. Patel said. Notice your motivations. If you feel pressure, internal or external, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this because I want to, or because I feel I should? Jean nodded slowly, absorbing the advice like sunlight. It wasn't a warning, it was a challenge. A reminder that growth wasn't just about action. It was about intention. As she left the office, Jean felt a flicker of unease, but also clarity. She liked Ethan. She wanted to see him again. But she would do it on her terms, not as a performance, not as proof. Because this time, she wasn't chasing someone to fill a void. She was choosing someone to share her space. And that, she realized, was a very different thing. Chapter 7. The Unexpected Rival. Jean was sprawled across her couch, scrolling through memes Maya had sent, when her phone buzzed with a new message. It was Ethan. Ethan. Hey, had a great time the other day. Want to grab dinner next week? Jean grinned, warmth blooming in her chest. She typed back, Jean, I'd love that. Any day but Thursday I have therapy. She hit send, then tossed the phone aside, humming to herself. Things were moving, slowly but moving. The phone buzzed again. Ethan, cool. Wednesday works. Just a heads up, I'm seeing someone else too. Hope that's okay. Jean froze mid-hum. Her stomach did a weird flip, like she'd swallowed a live fish. She stared at the message, reading it twice, then 3 times. Seeing someone else. Of course he was. This was modern dating. People juggled matches like circus performers. She knew this. She'd read the articles, heard the podcast. But knowing and feeling were 2 different beasts. Jean typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, Jean, thanks for telling me. Totally okay. She added a smiley face for good measure, then tossed the phone down like it had burned her. Totally okay? Ah. Her brain was already spiraling into a montage of Ethan laughing with some mystery woman, sharing pineapple pizza, quoting Vonnegut like she wasn't even in the picture. Jean groaned, burying her face in a pillow. She wasn't jealous, was she? No, she was competitive, which was worse. Her phone buzzed again. Maya, because of course Maya had radar for drama. Maya, how's my favorite almost none? Jean fired back. Jean, Ethan's dating someone else too. 3 dots appeared instantly. Maya, and? That's normal. You're not exclusive. Chill. Jean, I know it's normal. My brain just didn't get the memo. Maya, girl, this is the Olympics of dating. You're in the qualifying round. Don't trip over the hurdles. Jean laughed despite herself. Leave it to Maya to turn emotional chaos into a sports metaphor. She sat up, staring at the ceiling. Dr. Patel's words echoed. Are you dating for connection or validation? Jean sighed. Maybe this was the test. Could she handle ambiguity without spiraling? Could she stay grounded in what she wanted, not what her ego demanded? Her phone buzzed again. Ethan, confirming the restaurant for Wednesday. Jean typed back a cheerful sounds great, and hit send. Then she whispered to herself, like a mantra, you're fine. You're calm. You're not competing. You're totally okay. The pillow muffled her groan. Chapter 8. The Work Party Disaster. Jean had never been a fan of company mixers. They were a strange cocktail of forced cheer, awkward small talk, and people pretending to love the holiday playlist looping in the background. But this year she had a plan, a bold, slightly reckless plan. She was bringing Ethan. It wasn't about showing him off. Okay. Maybe a little. It was about testing the waters. Could she handle introducing him to her work world without spiraling into self-consciousness? Could they survive fluorescent lighting and lukewarm hors d'oeuvres together? The venue was a downtown hotel ballroom decked out in fake snow and twinkling lights. Jean arrived with Ethan at her side, looking effortlessly handsome in a charcoal blazer. She, in her emerald dress, felt like she'd stepped into a Hallmark movie, except the script was unwritten and the stakes were real. Wow, Ethan said, surveying the room. This is festive. Jean smirked. Corporate festive. Which means the budget went to the lights, not the food. He laughed, and Jean relaxed, until her boss, Mr. Henderson, materialized like a holiday ghost. Jean, Henderson boomed, his tie patterned with tiny reindeer. And who's this? Jean opened her mouth, but Henderson barreled on. Your fiancé? Jean choked on air. What? No, this is Ethan. We're dating. Henderson winked like he knew a secret. Ah, young love. Enjoy the party. He clapped Ethan on the shoulder and vanished into the crowd. Jean groaned. Fiancé? Seriously? Ethan grinned. Should I start practicing my vows? Don't you dare, Jean said, laughing despite herself. They made their way to the buffet, where Ethan bravely tackled a plate of suspicious-looking meatballs. Jean was mid-bite when Claire appeared, eyes wide with glee. You brought him, she whispered. dragging Maya behind her. He's cute. Like, actually cute. Jean rolled her eyes. Please don't interrogate him. Maya smirked. No promises. The interrogation began immediately. Favorite books? Worst date stories? Pineapple pizza stance. He passed with flying colors. Ethan handled it all with charm, even laughing when Maya asked if he had a criminal record. Just to be sure. Jean watched, equal parts amused and relieved. He wasn't flustered. He wasn't performing. He was just himself. And then disaster struck. The DJ, in a misguided attempt at holiday cheer, announced a couple's dance. Henderson reappeared, shoving Jean and Ethan toward the dance floor like a proud father. Jean hissed, "I don't dance." Ethan smiled. "Good thing I do." Before she could protest, his hand was at her waist, guiding her into a slow sway under the twinkling lights. Jean's heart thudded, not from panic, but from something softer, something terrifyingly sweet. "You're doing fine," Ethan murmured. Jean looked up, meeting his eyes. And for a moment the chaos faded, the bad meatballs, the boss's assumptions, the awkward holiday cheer. It was just them, moving in sync, laughing quietly like they shared a secret. When the song ended, Jean stepped back, cheeks flushed. "Well," she said, breathless, "that wasn't a total disaster." Ethan grinned. "Speak for yourself. I think Henderson's already planning our wedding." Jean laughed, and for the first time that night she didn't care who was watching. Chapter 9. The big misunderstanding. Jean was floating. Not in a literal sense, though after the holiday mixer, she felt like gravity had loosened its grip. Things with Ethan were good. Better than good. They'd texted every day since the party, sharing jokes, book recommendations, and the occasional meme that made her laugh so hard she snorted in public. So when Ethan suggested meeting at their favorite cafe on Saturday, Jean didn't hesitate. She even wore the green sweater, the one Maya swore was her power color. The cafe was bustling, the smell of espresso wrapping around her like a warm blanket. Jean spotted Ethan at a corner table, scrolling through his phone. He looked up, smiled, and waved her over. "Hey," he said, standing to hug her. His arms were warm, familiar now. "Hey," Jean echoed, sliding into the chair across from him. They ordered coffee, and for a while, everything was easy, banter flowing like water, laughter bubbling up without effort, until Jean's ears caught something that made her stomach twist. Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, smiled, and typed a quick reply. Jean didn't care, until she saw the name flash across the screen. Sophie. Her brain short-circuited. Sophie. Heart emoji. Jean forced a smile, but her thoughts were sprinting. Sophie? The other woman? The one he said he was seeing? And a heart emoji? She tried to focus on the conversation, but every word felt muffled, like she was underwater. Ethan was talking about a new short story he was writing, and Jean was nodding like a bobblehead, her mind screaming, "He's serious about her. You're just filler." When the coffees arrived, Jean stirred hers like it had personally offended her. "So," Ethan said, oblivious to the storm brewing in her head, "I was thinking we could check out that new bookstore next week." Jean blinked. "Next week?" "Yeah," he said, smiling. "Unless you're busy?" Jean hesitated, the words tangling in her throat. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe the heart emoji meant nothing. But old fears clawed their way up, fears of being second choice, of repeating patterns she'd sworn to break. "I don't know," she said finally, forcing a casual tone. "I've got a lot going on." Ethan's smile faltered, just slightly. "Okay, no pressure." They finished their coffee, conversation limping along like a wounded animal. When they hugged goodbye, Jean felt the weight of something cracking, not because of Ethan, but because of her own spiraling. Walking back to her car, she replayed Dr. Patel's words. "Are you dating for connection or validation?" Jean sighed, gripping her steering wheel like it could anchor her. She wasn't sure anymore. All she knew was that the green sweater didn't feel like a power color tonight. Felt like armor. Chapter 10. The grand gesture? Sort of. Jean was halfway through reorganizing her bookshelf, a coping mechanism disguised as productivity, when her phone buzzed. She ignored it at first, sliding white teeth next to Slaughterhouse-Five like a literary peace treaty. But the buzzing persisted, insistent, like a mosquito that refused to die. Finally, she grabbed the phone. A text from Ethan. "Ethan, hey, can we talk? In person?" Jean stared at the screen, her stomach doing that annoying flip again. She considered ignoring it, considered crafting a breezy shore, whenever that masked the storm inside her. Instead, she typed, "Jean, okay. Where?" "Ethan, your favorite bookstore. I'll bring coffee." Jean blinked. Her favorite bookstore? The one with the creaky floors and the smell of old paper that felt like home? He remembered that. 10 minutes later, she was in her car, heart pounding like a drumline. The bookstore was quiet, the kind of quiet that hummed with possibility. Jean pushed open the door, the bell chiming softly, and there he was, Ethan, standing by the fiction section, holding 2 steaming cups like peace offerings. "Hi," he said, his smile tentative but warm. "Latte extra foam. Like you like it." Jean took the cup, fingers brushing his. Thanks. They stood there for a beat, surrounded by shelves of stories, until Ethan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. I think I messed up, he said. Jean frowned. Messed up how? He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely flustered. That text, the one about Sophie, I didn't mean to make you feel like you were second choice. She's just someone I grabbed coffee with a couple times. It's not serious. You're the one I want to see. Jean blinked, her brain scrambling to catch up. You what? I like you, Jean. His voice was steady now, anchored. I like talking to you, laughing with you, arguing about pineapple pizza. I don't want this to be casual. Not with you. Jean's throat tightened, a cocktail of relief and disbelief swirling inside her. You could have just said that, she murmured. I'm saying it now, Ethan replied, his eyes locked on hers. And if you're still in, I'd really like to take you to that bookstore cafe next week. No ambiguity, just us. Jean stared at him, at the sincerity etched across his face, and something inside her softened, like ice cracking under sunlight. She laughed, a shaky, genuine laugh. You know, for a writer, you're terrible at texting. Ethan grinned. Guess I'm better in person. Jean sipped her latte, feeling the warmth seep into her bones. For the first time in weeks, the noise in her head quieted. No spiraling, no second-guessing, just clarity. Okay, she said, smiling. Next week. Just us. Ethan's grin widened, and in that moment, surrounded by stories of love and loss and everything in between, Jean realized this wasn't a grand gesture in the cinematic sense. No fireworks, no rain-soaked declarations. It was better. It was real. And for Jean, that was everything. Chapter 11. Vulnerability wins. Jean had always imagined vulnerability as a cliff, something you either leapt from or avoided entirely. Tonight, sitting across from Ethan at the bookstore cafe, she realized it was more like a door she'd kept locked for years, and now slowly was turning the key. The cafe was quiet, the hum of conversation soft against the crackle of a fireplace in the corner. Jean stirred her tea, buying time, because what she was about to say felt heavier than any witty banter they'd shared before. So, she began, voice lighter than she felt. I should probably warn you, I'm not great at this. Ethan tilted his head. At what? Drinking tea? Because you seem pretty skilled. Jean smiled, grateful for the joke, but shook her head. At being open. At letting someone in. Ethan leaned forward, his expression calm, inviting. You're doing fine so far. Jean exhaled, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. My last relationship, it wasn't good. I stayed way too long because I was terrified of being alone. 3 years of therapy later, I finally figured out it wasn't him I was clinging to. It was the fear. She laughed softly, self-conscious. So yeah, I've been single for a while. Ethan nodded, no judgment in his eyes. That makes sense. Fear can be loud. Jean blinked. You're not running for the hills? Why would I? Ethan shrugged. You're telling me the truth. That's rare. Jean stared at him, something loosening in her chest. What about you? Any skeletons I should know about? Ethan chuckled. Plenty. I used to think relationships were about fixing people. Turns out that's a terrible strategy. So now I'm trying something radical. Just showing up as myself. Jean grinned. Sounds exhausting. Terrifying, Ethan corrected, smiling back. But worth it. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that felt comfortable, like a shared blanket. Jean realized her hands weren't shaking. Her voice wasn't cracking. She was here, present, not performing, not proving, just being. And when Ethan reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers, it didn't feel like a leap off a cliff. Felt like stepping through that door, into something real. Jean squeezed his hand, a smile tugging at her lips. You know, she said softly, for someone who claims to be terrified, you're pretty good at this. Ethan grinned. Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain. Jean laughed, the sound light and unguarded. For the first time in years, vulnerability didn't feel like weakness. Felt like freedom. Chapter 12. Love. But make it real. Jean had always imagined defining a relationship as a grand, cinematic moment. Fireworks, sweeping music, maybe a dramatic kiss in the rain. Instead, it was a Tuesday night, and she was sitting on Ethan's couch, eating takeout straight from the carton while his cat tried to steal a dumpling. This is romantic, Jean said dryly, watching the cat's stealth mission. Ethan grinned, plucking the dumpling from feline jaws. Hey, nothing says commitment like sharing lo mein and defending it from predators. Jean laughed, but her heart was thudding softly, like a drum in the distance. They'd been seeing each other for weeks now. Coffee dates, bookstore trips, that disastrous holiday mixer, and everything felt good, better than good, which was exactly why the question had been hovering like a balloon she was afraid to pop. So, she began, setting down her chopsticks, where do you see this going? Ethan froze mid-bite, then set his carton aside. Straight to the hard questions, huh? Jean shrugged, trying to sound casual. I just want to know if we're on the same page. Ethan leaned back, studying her with those steady eyes that made her feel both exposed and safe. I like you, Jean. A lot. And I'm not interested in dating anyone else. Jean blinked. You're not. Nope. He smiled, a little sheepish. I deleted the app last week. Figured I'd rather spend my time arguing with you about pineapple pizza than swiping through strangers. Jean laughed, relief washing over her like warm rain. Good. Because I was about 2 seconds away from deleting mine. Ethan reached for her hand, his fingers threading through hers like it was the most natural thing in the world. So, what do you want to call this? Relationship? Partnership? Pineapple alliance? Jean snorted. Definitely pineapple alliance. Sounds very official. Perfect, Ethan said, grinning. We'll draft a treaty later. Jean shook her head, smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. It wasn't fireworks or rain-soaked declarations. It was takeout and laughter and a cat trying to steal dinner. And somehow that felt better. Because this wasn't about proving anything. Not to herself, not to anyone else. It was about choosing someone who made the ordinary feel extraordinary. Jean squeezed Ethan's hand, her voice soft but sure. I'm in. Ethan's smile widened, and in that quiet, imperfect moment, Jean realized something. Love didn't have to be a movie. It just had to be real. And this was real. Chapter 13. The text that didn't matter. Jean was curled up on the couch, a blanket draped over her legs, Ethan beside her reading a book while his cat claimed the prime spot on Jean's lap. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of a jazz playlist and the occasional rustle of pages. It was the kind of evening Jean had once thought belonged only to other people, the settled ones, the lucky ones. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She reached for it lazily, expecting a meme from Maya or a reminder from Claire about brunch. Instead, the name on the screen made her pause. Mark. The message was short, familiar, and utterly predictable. Hey stranger. Been thinking about you. Hope you're good. Jean stared at it for a beat, waiting for something. Anger, nostalgia, even the faint sting of curiosity. Nothing came. Not a flicker. She laughed, out loud. Ethan looked up from his book, eyebrows raised. What's funny? Jean turned the phone so he could see. Blast from the past. Ethan read the message, then smirked. Wow. Original. Jean grinned, tapping delete without hesitation. 3 years ago that would have wrecked me. And now? Ethan asked, setting his book aside. Jean shrugged, feeling lighter than air. Now it's just noise. She tossed the phone back on the table and nestled deeper into the couch, her head resting against Ethan's shoulder. The cat purred like a tiny engine. The jazz hummed on, and Jean felt something settle inside her. A quiet certainty that had nothing to do with Mark, or fear, or proving anything. She wasn't running from loneliness anymore. She wasn't chasing chaos. She was choosing this ordinary, imperfect, wonderful moment. Ethan kissed the top of her head, and Jean smiled, eyes closing as the weight of the past slipped away like dust. The text didn't matter, because she had finally learned the truth. Love wasn't about grand gestures or cinematic drama. It was about showing up, staying present, and laughing at the things that used to break you. And Jean? She was all in.